Number one, I have not found any reference in these. I mean, I have mentioned these as the 5 pillars, but I think based on my reading, my research, and my interviews with both in Islamabad and in Washington, that these, in fact, are the 5 pillars. What is missing in there, one is linkage to civil society actors. And unlike Afghanistan, where it was very rightly mentioned that they are no capable, trained administrators or civil society actors. In Pakistan, there are. In 2007 to 2009, they showed by coming on the streets in support of lawyers' movement. Hundreds of thousands of these people came on the street, defying Musharraf, defying the law enforcement agencies. There are strong groups, and most recently, Asma Jahangir, a lady who's well-known human rights activist, won a very important election of the Supreme Court bar. The point I'm making, there are those civil society actors who have the potential to really make a change. I don't see the 5 pillars of US foreign policy supporting or strengthening them in any way. Second, inadequacy. And I'll just remind you, I'd mentioned 3 core US national security interests: loose nukes, militants in the tribal areas, and national security interest or homeland security interest, Pakistani diaspora in some ways in US. One way to tackle that was through police reforms. And unlike, again, Afghan police or the Iraqi police, there has been an internal demand for police reform in Pakistan. There is capacity. I have a bias. I have formerly, before my academic career, I was a police officer in Pakistan. But my interviews tell me that there is a lot of effort. So police reforms will help rule of law. Rule of law will help democracy. So that pattern should be taken. And just because there's no time, there were 2 other adjustments I would have suggested. One is de-radicalization. Yes. Progressive religious leaders in Pakistan are being murdered. They are being assassinated. But that vacuum is being filled continuously. If you want to at least hear one of those people who can really do something for de-radicalization in Pakistan, that is Dr. A well-known Pakistani writer whose name I'm missing, who's actually speaking here on November 8th. He is the one who has given a 600-page fatwa against suicide bombing, a leading Barelvi scholar. There are others like Javed Ghamidi as well. And last but not the least, the whole issue of regional context. If we'll continue to look at it as an AFPAC thing and miss the fact that Pakistan formulates its policy because of India, that whether we like it or not, that remains an important issue. As Saab Arakat had very rightly mentioned, and I'm finishing with this point, Saab Arakat had rightly said, there are things we are told are not possible, but then there are things that are needed. Involvement of India and Pakistan-India peace process is needed for security in Afghanistan, for peace in Pakistan. I'll close with this one quote of President Obama when he had said in Cairo that one way to build relationship, the foundation of this new relationship between the United States and Middle East and the Muslim world is to build it on trust, common interests or mutual interests, and mutual respect. I think that is the only way forward for a progressive, fruitful, and sustainable relationship between US and the Muslim world, including Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time here, so we're going to quickly open it up to questions. If people could just stand behind the mic in the mic aisles, and we'll cluster questions. Let's take 2 from here to begin, and if you could introduce yourself and your affiliation, please.
My name's Stephen. Hassan. My name's Stephen Kalin. No affiliation. I have a question for Stephen Biddle and Paul Pillar. It seems that a repeated theme of this conference has been that we should look at issues and conflicts in the region with a comprehensive view, taking into consideration not just one conflict or country, but the larger view. It seems to me that U.S. military policy in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and Iraq, excuse me, for the past decade approximately has been myopic in the sense that we will attack terrorist strongholds, kill some of the terrorists, other terrorists flee from that area and move to another one. An example, if my facts are correct, bin Laden was in Sudan before 9/11, the U.S. put pressure on Sudan. He fled to Afghanistan. He's now fled to Pakistan. So I guess my question is where, and if my appraisal is wrong, please let me know. But where will the terrorists go if the U.S. military is successful in getting them to leave Pakistan? And in your opinion, does the U.S. government have a long-term strategy for dealing with this sort of global terrorist movement?
Thank you very much. And then one more question here, and then we'll go to the other side.
Thank you. Todd Culet, American University. The panel indicated there's really bizarre things that happen when you inject $50 billion into a developing economy, and it creates a really bizarre set of incentives that embolden various nefarious predatory networks. It's part of the broader coin strategy is why we do it. Is there a better way to do it, or should we do something different? If we don't inject that much money, what should we be doing instead? Thank you.
Okay, let's turn to our panel quickly. So for the first question, that was for Steve and Paul. Who wants to take it?
Let me respond to the first question. I hope Steve will address more the second one. I agree very much with the premise of the question about myopic, as you put it, counter-terrorist operations, and I would just sort of rephrase your premise in a way that I've spoken and written about a lot, which is this is not a territorially defined problem, even though we Americans tend to think of it that way. There is no limit to answers to your specific question about where would the terrorists go. If it wasn't Sudan, it's Afghanistan. If it's not Afghanistan, it's Pakistan. If it's not Pakistan, it's Yemen. If it's not Yemen, it's someplace else. And the point I tried to make earlier was that if you look at what terrorist groups, be they Al-Qaeda or somebody else, do to actually prepare for attacks that would cause us the most harm, and I would put the 9/11 plot right at the top of that list, most of the preparation is not based on a chunk of real estate that is bombable or subject to a coin campaign. Much of it is right here in the West in cities, or if it's not in the West, it's in other places, urban areas that are not suitable military targets.
I guess I'll start with the 50 billion question then and move to the issue of terrorists and their movements. I don't think the issue is how much money we're spending, to be honest. I think it's how it's being used and who it's being paid to. If the choice before us is simply one of, do we spend the amount of money we're spending now in the way we are, or do we just shut it off? I would actually prefer just shutting it off. I don't think that's the actual choices we face. I think that the key requirement is that we do a better job of understanding to whom we are paying this money. And what is the subcontracting structure behind the people to whom we are paying this money? And are we paying people who are empowering and enabling a patronage network that's undermining our prospects in the war? Or are we paying and enabling people who are outside that network and whose effects are potentially benign or helpful? So when I say contracting reform, I mean reform advisedly, not just the end of contracting. I think we need to do the intelligence work to understand how is our money being used and to whom is it being paid. Now, just a quick word with respect to the issue of terrorism. Paul and I disagree with respect to the role of geography in this problem. The central reason I think why we disagree, though I suppose I'll leave it to Paul to determine whether he agrees with me or not, is that I think it's terribly important to disaggregate terrorism into forms that are sufficiently virulent that they require major expenditure of effort on our part to deal with, and forms that are much less virulent and that I think at the end of the day we're going to have to learn to live with. And one of the central distinguishers between the former and the latter is the prospective use of weapons of mass destruction. The reason why I worry about Pakistan in ways that I do not, frankly, worry about Yemen and Somalia or Djibouti and all the rest is because Pakistan has a nuclear arsenal, the others do not. And in the event that the Pakistani state were to collapse as a result of failure in its internal war, I could imagine scenarios in which a breakup of the Pakistani military and intelligence service could result in the transfer of usable weapons to a terrorist organization that might very well use them against us. In that context, I'm much less worried about the movement of terrorists across borders around the world. And I'm much more worried in the specific problem of the stability of Pakistan. And the reason I care about Afghanistan is not primarily because it could potentially be a base for Osama bin Laden in the way that it was in 2001. It's primarily because states are ordinarily concerned with the stability of their neighbors when it comes to their own internal stability. We worry, heaven knows, tremendously about the role of Pakistani safe havens in undermining the stability of the government in Kabul. I actually think the more severe problem is in the long run, the opposite direction. The whole US involvement in the Balkans in the 1980s and 90s was driven to a large degree by concern with the effect of stability in the Balkans on stability in trading partners and NATO allies of ours in Europe. The reason that the issue of Mexico is getting the attention in the American public debate now that it does is because of a concern that stability can in fact have negative effects instability can in fact have negative effects across borders. Now, reasonable people can disagree as to whether the scale of investment we are now making in Afghanistan is commensurate with the scale of that threat. I have argued elsewhere that on the analytic merits, it's a rather close call because the nature of our security interests are primarily indirect in this sense with respect to Afghanistan. And the costs of waging the war are obviously high. But I think it is the case that if you wanted to make an argument for the necessity of being involved in Afghanistan, it would lie principally in Afghanistan's effects on Pakistan. And this is not a bizarre or idiosyncratic argument that does not, in fact, affect international politics normally around the globe, which, in fact, I think it does.